I'm going to walk you through how you may want to reach out to influencers. I'm going to do that by showing you the approach that I use in the SaaS industry, the software industry. So once you have a list of target influencers, maybe you got it from SparkToro, maybe you manually went through Amazon or YouTube and started compiling a database. The first approach that I would take is to offer them a perpetually free account for your product. And you might want to label this as something special like a VIP account or an unlimited account. You can email them, you can write them on their Facebook page or whatever channel that they're on for social media. You can connect with them on LinkedIn to write them. If you have connections, personal or professional or otherwise, you can go through that person to get a conversation started. If the person is very high profile and they're difficult to get a hold of, what you may want to try is direct mail or a handwritten letter. And another thing to note is that they may not respond right away, and it doesn't necessarily mean they're not interested. You may need to follow up 4 or more times before they respond, especially in cases where they have somebody else managing their social media, which is very often the situation. It may appear as though it's that influencer with their photo, but it's actually someone else that's managing the account. Now, there are ways to automate this, but again, don't focus on automation in the beginning with your growth hacking. Just focused on manually doing things to prove concepts and then approach the scalability factor. So to be able to scale something like this, you would use a program such as Outreach or Lemlist, where you can have a whole series of follow-up emails with personalization. And there are other tools you can use for things like LinkedIn too. A good thing is that once you have a notable influencer who signs up for your product, you've set a precedent in a form of social proof and authority that will entice other people to follow up. So you can send, for example, an email here where you're talking about how the other person just signed up. Why aren't you, essentially? The other thing to note is that in some cases, in my experience, it's actually been easier getting high profile people to review my product or endorse my product than getting those kind of low level or mid level influencers. So don't go in with a lot of assumptions that it's going to be easier. I know from my experience when I was applying to business school, I had top schools that were more interested in me than lower ranked schools. And I don't know why, but I think that sometimes people just don't believe you when they don't think you're actually interested. And they might just think it's a spam or a trick or something like that. But a high profile person or a high profile school, in my case, knows that you're interested. They're going to take you seriously. Now, the other thing is that not everybody is going to be interested in free access to your product. So in a lot of cases, the influencer isn't actually the same as the customer. They're not like a prototype of the customer. They're different. They're an influencer that isn't sort of an industry type person. So here you may need other incentives. So for example, free merchandise that you have to actually mail to them. A lot of people do this in the business consumer space because they want YouTubers, for example, to show off their products, their t-shirts, their microphones, whatever. Another thing that you can do is you pay them to do a demo. So similar to what I talked about getting business to business people to respond to offers is just to entice them with money or gift cards. So for example, this Visa gift card I have in the upper right. Some of the research that I saw with influencers and how they want to be compensated is they just want money. So they want to be paid $1,000 for a blog or a social media push, or they want to do a $3,000 webinar or something like that. My bias, and statistically maybe this isn't true, but I try to avoid that at first. You don't want to just pay for posts. What you want to do is align incentives so that that person has an added benefit of actually getting people to sign up for your product, or an added benefit of them actually using the product. So you and the influencer should behave as though you're both representing the same company. Now, the thing is, an influencer who is well established and is successful is not going to want to take a pure commission style compensation structure. So the way you can configure the relationship is that you give them a guarantee. So we're going to guarantee you $5,000, but if you're able to get, 200 people to sign up for the product, then we're going to give you 30% commission or 50% commission, whatever it is. The other thing you can do is have a mixed compensation structure. So, hey, we're going to give you $2,000, but because we want you to actually endorse the product and not just talk about it casually like an ad that's not very convincing at all, we're going to give you an extra 10 to 15% of revenue for those new paying customers, something like that. You have to do the math to figure out your customer acquisition cost. So one way I've done this before is with attribution. So I talked earlier about how you shouldn't obsess over attribution, but when you're talking about paid media spend, it can be very helpful. So one way I did it was I had people doing live videos, about I think it was 10 to 20 of them, and I gave them each a unique link. So I was able to see how many people were signing up and able to see, who was generating me users for 5 cents versus 10 cents, that sort of thing. Another thing is that sometimes you just get free publicity, and I've had that happen with tier 1 influencers. So as your influencer program starts to get more advanced, you may want to build like a partnership program where they get a certification badge, they get a percentage of recurring revenue, you give them co-marketing opportunities, you give them exclusive access to data and information and training, you give them some sort of status, or something like you're a VIP user, or you give them some sort of title like chief evangelist. Guy Kawasaki is the chief evangelist for Canva, something like that. Other tips is that you can just invite influencers to be a guest on your podcast, webinar, whatever. That's great because it's going to entice more people to show up if they have a recognized brand there. You be a guest on their podcast or their webinar, invite them to your YouTube channel. And of course, just make sure that you're focused on what we call the collaborator value proposition. It's what's in it for them.